if it works. There we go. So we're going to read The Mountain Is You. And I read this book last year and I found it very, very inspirational. It's really easy to read, very practical. It's all around self-sabotage. Are you guilty of self-sabotage? So many people are. So let's sit back and read chapter 1. The mountain is you. There is nothing holding you back in life more than yourself. How's that for a first line? Pretty potent. If there is an ongoing gap between where you are and where you want to be, and your efforts to close it are consistently met with your own resistance, pain, and discomfort, self-sabotage is almost always at work. On the surface, self-sabotage seems masochistic. It appears to be a product of self-hatred, low confidence, or a lack of willpower. In reality, though, self-sabotage is simply the presence of an unconscious need that is being fulfilled by the self-sabotaging behavior. To overcome this, we must go through a process of deep psychological excavation. We must pinpoint the traumatic event, release unprocessed emotions, find healthier ways to meet our needs, reinvent our self-image, and develop principles such as emotional intelligence and resilience. It's no small task, and yet it's the work that all of us must do at one point or another. Self-sabotage is not always obvious at the onset. When Carl Jung was a child, he fell on the ground in school and hit his head. When he got hurt, he thought to himself, yes, maybe I won't go back to school now. Though he is known today for his insightful body of work, he actually didn't like school or fit in well with his peers. Shortly after his accident, Jung began experiencing sporadic and uncontrollable fainting spells. He unconsciously developed what he would call a neurosis and ultimately came to recognize that all neuroses are substitutes for legitimate suffering. In Jung's case, he made an unconscious association between fainting and getting out of school. He came to believe that the fainting spells were a manifestation of his unconscious desire to get out of class, where he felt uncomfortable and unhappy. Likewise, for many people, their fears and attachments are often just symptoms of deeper issues for which they do not have any better way to cope. Self-sabotage is a coping mechanism. Self-sabotage is what happens when we refuse to consciously meet our innermost needs, often because we do not believe we're capable of handling them. Sometimes we sabotage our relationships because what we really want to find is ourselves, though we're afraid to be alone. Sometimes we sabotage our professional success because what we really want is to create art, even if it would make us seem less ambitious by society's measures. Sometimes we sabotage our healing journey by psychoanalyzing our feelings because doing so ensures we avoid actually experiencing them. Sometimes we sabotage our self-talk because if we believed in ourselves, we'd feel free to get back out into the world and take risks, and that would leave us vulnerable. In the end, self-sabotage is very often just a maladaptive coping mechanism. In a way, we give ourselves what we need without having to actually address what the need is. But like any coping mechanism, it's just that, a way to cope. It's not the answer, it's not a solution, and it's not ever truly solving the problem. We are merely numbing our desires and giving ourselves a little taste of temporary relief. Does this resonate? Self-sabotage comes from an irrational fear. Sometimes our most sabotaging behaviors are really the result of long-held and unexamined fears we've had about the world itself. Perhaps it's an idea that you're unintelligent, unattractive, or disliked. Perhaps it's the idea of losing a job, taking an elevator, or committing to a relationship. In other cases, it can be more abstract, such as a concept of someone coming to get you, violating your boundaries, getting caught, or being wrongly accused. These beliefs become attachments over time. For most people, the abstract fear is really a representation of a legitimate fear. Because it would be too scary to actually dwell on the real fear, we project those feelings onto issues or circumstances that are less likely to occur. If the situation has extremely low likelihood of becoming reality, it therefore becomes a safe thing to worry about because subconsciously we already know it isn't going to happen. Therefore, we have an avenue to express our feelings without actually endangering ourselves. For example, if you are someone who is deeply afraid of being a passenger in a car, maybe your real fear is the loss of control or the idea that someone or something else is controlling your life. Perhaps the fear is of moving forward, and the moving car is simply a representation of that. If you're aware of the real issue, you could begin working to resolve it, perhaps by identifying the ways you're giving up your power or being too passive. However, if you aren't aware of the real problem, you'll continue to spend your time trying to convince yourself not to be triggered and anxious while riding in the car and finding that it only gets worse. If you try to fix the problem on the surface, you will always come up against a wall. This is because you're trying to rip a band-aid off before you have a strategy to heal the wound. It's so interesting, isn't it? What are you thinking? Self-sabotage comes from unconscious negative associations. Self-sabotage is one of those first signs that your inner narrative is outdated, limiting, or simply incorrect. Your life is defined not only by what you think about, but also what you think of yourself. Your self concept is an idea that you spent your whole life building. It was created by piecing together inputs and influences from those around you, what your parents believed, what your peers thought, what became self evident through personal experience, and so on. Your self image is difficult to adjust because your brain's confirmation bias works to affirm your pre existing beliefs about yourself. When we self sabotage, it's often because we've a negative association between achieving a goal we aspire to and being the kind of person who has or does the thing. If your issue is that you want to be financially stable, for example, and yet you keep ruining every effort to get there, you have to go back to the first to your concept of money. How did your parents manage their finances? More importantly, what did they tell you about people who had it and people who didn't? Self sabotage comes from what's unfamiliar. Human beings experience a natural resistance to the unknown because it's essentially the ultimate loss of control. This is true even if what's unknown is benevolent or even beneficial to us. Self sabotage is very often the simple product of unfamiliarity, and it's because anything that is foreign, no matter how good, will also be uncomfortable until it's also familiar. This often leads people to confuse the discomfort of the unknown with being wrong or bad or ominous. However, it's simply a matter of psychological adjustment. Gay Hendricks calls this your upper limit or your tolerance for happiness. You may have heard of Gay Hendricks. I'm just not reading, I'm just telling you this part. He wrote a book called The Big Leap, an amazing book. I highly recommend that one too. Maybe I'll come in and read some of that as well. Everyone has a capacity for which they allow themselves to feel good. This is similar to what other psychologists refer to as a person's baseline or their set predisposition that they eventually revert back to, even if certain events or circumstances shift temporarily. Small shifts, compounded over time, can result in permanent baseline adjustments. Now that's juicy. However, they often don't stick because we come up upon our upper limits. The reason we don't allow those shifts to become baselines is because as soon as our circumstances extend beyond the amount of happiness that we're accustomed to, we find ways both conscious and unconscious to bring ourselves back to feeling we're comfortable with. We are programmed to seek what we've known. Even though we think we're after happiness, we're actually trying to find whatever it is we're most used to. Self-sabotage comes from belief systems. What you believe about your life is what you'll make true about your life. That's why it's so crucial to be aware of these outdated narratives and have the courage to change them. Maybe you've gone through the majority of life believing that a standard 50K per year salary at a decent company is the most you'll ever be capable of. Maybe you've spent so many years telling yourself, I am an anxious person, that you actually started to identify with it, adopting anxiety and fear into your belief system about who you fundamentally are. Maybe you were raised in a closed-minded social circle or an echo chamber. Maybe you did not know that you could question or arrive at new conclusions about politics or religion. Maybe you never even thought you were someone who could have great style, feel content, or travel the world. In other cases, your limiting beliefs might come from wanting to keep yourself safe. Maybe that's why you prefer the comfort of what you've known, to the vulnerability of what you don't, while you prefer apathy to excitement, think that suffering makes you more worthy, or believe that every good thing in life there must be an accompanying bad. To truly heal, you're going to have to change the way you think. You are going to have to become very conscious of the negative and false beliefs and start shifting to a mindset that actually serves you. How to get out of denial. Maybe this preliminary information about self-sabotage resonates a bit, or maybe it resonates a lot. Either way, if you're here because you truly want to change your life, you're going to have to stop being in denial about your personal state of affairs. You're going to have to get real with yourself. You're going to have to decide that you love yourself too much to stop settling for less than what you really deserve. If you think that you could be doing better in life, you might be right. If you think that there is more to you, to who you are, and what you are here to accomplish, you might be right. If you think that you're not being your authentic self, you might be right. It does not serve us to use endless affirmations to placate our true feelings when we're on our journey. When we do this, we start disassociating and get stuck. In an effort to love ourselves, we try to validate everything about who we are. Yet those warm sentiments never quite seem to stick, only ever temporarily numbing the discomfort. Why don't they work? Because deep down, we know we're not being quite who we want to be. And until we accept this, we're never going to find peace. When we're in denial, we tend to go into blame mode. We look for anyone or anything to explain why we are the way we are. Then we start justifying. If you have to constantly or on a nearly daily basis rationalize why you're unhappy about your life, you're not doing yourself any favors. You're not getting any closer to creating the lasting change you so deeply desire. The first step in healing anything is taking full accountability. It's no longer being in denial about the honest truth of your life and yourself. It does not matter what your life looks like on the outside, it's how you feel about it on the inside. It's not okay to be constantly stressed, panicked, and unhappy. Something is wrong, and the longer you try to love yourself out of realizing this, the longer you're going to suffer. The greatest act of self-love is to no longer accept a life you are unhappy with. It is to be able to state the problem plainly and in a straightforward manner. I'm going to read that again. The greatest act of self-love is to no longer accept a life that you're unhappy with. It is to be able to state the problem plainly and in a straightforward manner. And that is precisely what you need to do to continue truly uprooting your life and transforming it. It is the first step towards real change. Oh, such a good book. What do you think?